Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Meichi Ng to celebrate the publication of Barely Functional Adult, It'll All Make Sense Eventually, published by Harper Perennial. Wielding her trademark balance of artful humor, levity, and heartbreaking introspection, Meichi Ng's indisputably relatable collection of short stories holds a mirror to our past, present, and future selves. Meichi is the creator of Barely Functional Adult, a comic she started back in 2015. She tells nonsense stories from her teeny tiny apartment in Vancouver, British Columbia. Moderating tonight's conversation is Jason Adam Katzenstein, a cartoonist and writer for print and television. He's the illustrator of The White Man's Guide to White Male Writers of the Western Canon and the graphic novel Camp Midnight. He is also a visiting professor at Wesleyan University. I'll remind you that all of you watching tonight can order your copy of Barely Functional Adult from Books and Books below by pressing the green button at the bottom of the screen. Every purchase you make keeps Books and Books up and running. So we thank you, and we remind you that indie bookstores need your help now more than ever. We'll have time for a Q&A with the audience following the talk, so please post your questions anytime during the broadcast in the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those right after the talk. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the stage. Hi, Meichi.
Hi.
Hi, Jason.
Hello. We're toggled in.
We're in. It's happening.
How's it going? Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on your book, too, which came out earlier this year.
Oh, thank you. I feel like a good way to have a conversation is to kind of talk generally about how you're feeling about the book and get into a passage, and then talk more specifically after that. Then we can get into technicalities because you'll have shared some of the funny and moving work for this audience, and then we can really get into the weeds.
All right, sounds good.
Is that a good plan? Yeah. Tell me, how are you feeling now that these stories are out in the world?
A little bit nervous. I think occasionally I'll have a friend message me and tell me that they saw my book and read it. So that's the nervous part. But it's really nice. I think there's been a lot of nice messages. People tell me what books or what part they like or dislike. It just feels more real because it's out and done.
Is there a consistent bit of feedback that you get? Is there a takeaway that you hear again and again from people when they read your work, or is it different stuff?
I think it's different every time. My favorite type of feedback is when they say they feel seen or that they're busted or someone wrote a book about them. So that's definitely the ones that I like the most, and I do get a couple of those. But in general, it's been, some people kind of go in a bit deeper and they'll tell me what chapters really resonated, whereas other people would just send generic love, which is nice.
Yeah. I was wondering if you wrote this with a particular reader in mind, or more generally, if you were thinking about a specific audience or everyone, or.
I don't think I had a specific audience. I do know there are certain chapters that probably resonate with a certain age range, but I tried to include a little bit for everyone. So hopefully at least one or two chapters speak to you.
One or two chapters absolutely do speak to me specifically, and I'm really excited for the part where we really get into some of these stories and perhaps to lay the groundwork for that. I know that you have a passage that you have prepared, and maybe I can also hold up the pages for our audience while you read.
Wow, that's very intense. Yes, that would be awesome. I feel like Phoebe and Friends. Okay, so I kind of prepared 12 pages. Hopefully it's not too long. but I'm starting on page 295. Yes, that's the one on the right side. Okay, sorry. I'm just trying to find a comfortable position to hold the book. Okay. Okay, so this is a sort of like a passage from chapter 7, The Old Apocalypse. And I'll try to read the comic panels by saying me and friend or some way to identify that someone's switching. And hopefully the fact that Jason is holding the book up will make a bit more sense.
Do you want me to read for friend?
Oh, that would be awesome. Can you?
Yeah, of course. I can be friend and you can be you.
Okay, do you also want to be waiter?
Yeah, I'll be waiter.
Okay, you can be waiter and friend. Sweet. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had never identified as an adult despite having an ID that proved otherwise. The notion of being an adult just seemed like such a dreary badge to slap on. It also carried this connotation of being someone immutably stuffy and incapable of having fun, neither of which I was particularly inclined to relate to. And while I had made the effort to be dependable and responsible when necessary, I always made sure to leave a margin of joy. A small margin for joy, a slight yet critical barrier to separate myself from the real adults of the world. Thanks for holding it. So that's me drawing the critical barrier versus real adults. My friends had shared a similar philosophy, and this unified pledge towards the conservation of our youth kept the plague of aging at bay for many years. But all paradise is eventually lost, and ours was not immune to the tides of time. The initial signs of infection were first seen among my closest friends. Their decision-making became uncharacteristically responsible, and their risk tolerance skewed disturbingly conservative. Like the lone protagonist of a post-apocalyptic story, I was the only one who saw the emergence of rational thinking for what it truly was, an early symptom of aging souls.
Would the two of you like mimosas with your brunch orders?
I would like a mimosa. Thank you so much for asking.
None for me, thanks. Okay.
Why none for you? You love mimosas. You love alcohol.
Haha, I just don't really drink anymore.
That's fair. And so it begins. Now I'm talking to the friend who historically parties harder than anyone I know. That was fun. Where should we go next?
It's getting late. Should we call it a night?
It's 9 p.m.
Yes, but we have work tomorrow.
That's fair. It's as though I do not know you anymore. Now I'm talking to my friend who historically loves buying impractical goods, and they are holding a bear onesie.
Look how cute this is.
Get it.
Nah, these things are hard to wash. Plus, I'm already over budget this month.
That's fair. Goodbye, dear friend. It was hard to watch. One by one, my friends were becoming unrecognizable monsters as they evolved from their beautiful, barely functional selves into deplorably responsible humans.
Let's get started for lunch. And then, oh, it's too late to drink caffeine. And let's stay in instead of going out.
I love those voices so much more than I've ever done them. The old apocalypse, it's here. I, on the other hand, had no intention of surrendering my youth. If my previously cool best friends wanted to be painfully sober, fiscally responsible, well-rested adults, that was fine. To each their own. And then like a new comic panel. I'm just gonna say it. I think you're getting older, psychologically speaking.
You mean we are getting older?
Nope, just you. I have not agreed to aging just yet.
Your blessing is not required in order for you to age. You realize that, right?
And then it's just me sipping mimosa. Let's face it, my friends were bringing me down. Technically, they were raising me up, but I was a reluctant passenger on this spaceship to monotony. I wasn't ready to be steadily responsible. Not yet, at least. I barely had enough fun in the last decade of my life and was expecting at least a few more rounds of reckless adventures.
Oh, I think one could make the argument that you've had enough fun.
one can never have enough fun. So these are the last 2 pages. I am in despair.
The same despair as last week's?
No, a different type of despair. Everyone's getting so old, so disgustingly old.
Remind me again why you were surprised by aging?
I mean, I knew we would age, I just didn't expect it to come so soon. I told you, I will not go gentle into the night.
I can see that.
That's it. Thank you for reading the other person so I don't have to read by myself like a weirdo.
I never know how to do comics readings. Is this a problem you've encountered?
Yep. I mean, at first I was like, yeah, I could do a reading. And then I started looking at my book. I'm like, okay, this is going to be really, really awkward.
Yeah, it's weird because when somebody's reading prose, sometimes I'm like, are you going to do the voices? That's kind of my only question. But when it's words and pictures, I think Alison Bechdel has figured it out. Because she does this thing, I don't know, have you ever seen her read live?
No, I haven't.
She will, like her work has a lot of captions, and she will take the captions out of the images and she'll have them on her page so that she's like reading a thing you can't see, which I think is so smart.
That is smart, yeah.
One thing that really comes alive in your work when we read aloud, despite my bad attempts at trying to keep up and act out the parts, is your sense of comic timing, which is so strong. And I was wondering, like, do you think about comic timing in your work?
I think about it just because of a layout perspective. I'm sure you do too, and I noticed it when I was reading your book. This is Jason's book, by the way. It's really cool. You guys should get it. But I think it's just like figuring out where the pauses are more than the comic timing. I think like comedic timing is like, okay, I kind of sense that there should be a pause between this and like the punchline. But I think figuring out where to pause for either like the writing or the illustrations, that's more top of mind for me.
Yeah, no, it's like the thing about jazz, how it's like more about the notes that you don't play.
Yeah. I think like especially with our type of books where you have both illustrations and kind of like writing interwoven together, there's a lot of, it's like your brain has to do like a weird jump every now and then to figure out what's an illustration and what's a comic. How do you do it when you were writing your book?
I think that the way I did it is that I did them at the same time. Like I would, and I thought about it a bit like in understanding comics, what Scott McCloud refers to as like show and tell. Yeah. That part of that book always really resonated with me. And it's like when something makes more sense visually, then I'll draw it. When it makes more sense as words, I'll write it. If it's like, if something is 5 pounds, like you can write that more specifically than you can draw it. But if something looked frightening, then that feels like it's a drawing. How about you?
I think it's the same. I remember your like drawings of the statues or the things that you're afraid of in the book, and I was like, oh, this is such a good decision to draw this one thing because now it's in my mind forever. I think there's like a little bit of bias, right? There's some things that are just more fun to draw. Like for me, it was really fun to draw like the Dying Wasp, which went on for like so many panels purely because I'm like, this is so much fun. I'm super excited to draw this wasp slowly dying over like a series of 6 panels, which is completely unnecessary and totally gratuitous, but it was really fun.
That also brings me to a question I wanted to ask you, which is there are several instances in this book where you have these metaphors, but they are literalized. One in the form of gum, there's bees, there's jars that you use in a really funny and poignant chapter about therapy. And I'm wondering how you happened upon literalizing these idioms and what that process was like.
Yeah, so the wasps were an obvious one just because it actually happened. And as I was suffering and sitting there, I'm like, I'm going to draw this into a comic. So that wasn't really a decision. Gum was more so like I was really struggling to find a way that would anonymize certain people, as well as try to like, because I feel like it would be hard to draw a person that captures everyone's person. So instead I was like, let's just stick to the feeling of it, right? Like the feeling of being stuck on someone and then having some way to show it in comic form. And then the jars for the therapy, that one was just, I guess, like something I always had in mind. And like just the idea of having too many things to put into one jar was my first kind of like thought. And then it became like, okay, well, maybe we need more jars. And then how many jars do we need? And then I just kind of sat there and thought about it for like an hour.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I totally feel that about how sometimes when you're trying to create a composite character or to tell stories about a few instances but consolidate them, that like there are ways in the cartoon language where that might turn into some kind of visual metaphor. I'm also wondering about your own character design. You know, in your author photo, you're holding up the toy version of that. But yeah, I'm wondering how you went about designing yourself in blue and with the swirly unconnected people. And
So it started off with me wanting to draw a person and then not quite landing on if I wanted to make like gender overt in that person. And then I decided, well, no, I don't want to, because that's not the point. And then I decided to draw a blob because I'm like, well, if I'm going to be doing this for so many comics, I should do something that's easy to do. And I thought it would be easier to draw like a random shape, but it turns out it's a lot harder, at least for me, to do, because there's like certain nuances in terms of like where the eyes have to sit. But now, because I decided to draw a blob, there's no like frame of reference for me, and I'm just like really bad at drawing. So yeah, it was really just trying to find something easy to draw and something that
oh, I'm so sorry. There's a knock at my door. I'm gonna mute that.
Okay, I guess I'm chilling here for a bit.
That's awesome. Oh my god.
He was so calm before his pup. It's a new puppy, apparently.
A new puppy. I think his name is Winston, I think he said.
I think so. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I met him on camera like 2 days ago too.
So this is an amazing conversation. I hope he comes back soon. What's the t-shirt you're wearing? That's so cool.
It's a Simpsons t-shirt.
Ah, beautiful.
Hi, sorry to fill you all in on this live television moment. My upstairs neighbors very nicely said we want to walk Winston the dog, and so
that's nice.
Yeah, but I'm so sorry to have jumped up.
No worries. Yeah, so it was just like drawing a character that's simple to draw, drawing something that was more gender neutral so that people could project themselves more easily, hopefully, and not just be distracted by that person. Because it's like, that's why I don't even have a name for the character, which I just refer to as BFA, because I want it to be like a place that someone could put themselves into the shoes of. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think a lot about, I mean, that's also an understanding comics thing that McLeod talks about a lot. I don't know why I've got that book on the brain right now.
Scott knows what he's doing.
He really, really does, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Are there cartoon characters who you look at and identify with?
Oh, so many. Like Ali Brosh's Hyperbole and a Half, definitely one of my faves. And definitely inspired me to write like this kind of comic where you could do both illustrations and comics woven into like a story. Calvin and Hobbes growing up was a big deal. I read and reread those books so much, specifically for Calvin, but just because like, who else are you supposed to be? Like, you can't really be Hobbes. I guess you could be if you were like really sensible as a child, which I wasn't. But yeah, like a lot of different characters, a lot of different webcomic artists as well. What about you?
Spider-Man. I identified a lot with Spider-Man. But when he was Peter Parker, because
Yeah.
He was a big nerd who had really conventional problems, and I thought was the genius of it. And I read all these superhero comics because those were the comics that were around. And I realized that I might not love the superhero genre so much as I love this medium.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy that I feel like comics has really expanded to accommodate such a comprehensive just world, every genre, and webcomics is a big part of that. I love Hyperbole and a Half, and also you've got a huge Instagram audience, and it's a different kind of interaction that you have, right? Because you post tiny bits of things, and people can respond to them in real time. And I'm wondering how you feel about publishing work on Instagram.
It's so stressful. I don't know if you have this as well, because I know you have Instagram as well. But I find it personally very stressful because on the one hand, you want to kind of post work out there and you want to respond to the feedback you get, because sometimes people put really personal responses and I want to make sure I'm responding to it and like as much as possible. But at the same time, I feel like it's really hard to share personal work on the internet and not feel the effects of whether or not the post does well or doesn't do well. So like for me, it's been like our process to try to determine if a comic is good and then just kind of let it go in the world and just check enough to respond to comments, but not so much that I'm distracted by like the analytics of it. But I am still like, it still does bug me a little bit. What about you?
It doesn't help that Instagram's like, this post is performing 90% better.
Yeah. This post is not performing well. You did a terrible job. That's like the underlying theme of it.
Man, it's like it starts to be a critic too, and it's like, this post was 90% less interesting about your life than this last one. Do you want to consider telling a better anecdote?
No. Do you want to consider redoing your life a little bit? I don't know.
I mean, I think about the little paperclip, the Microsoft Word paperclip, who is kind of just like laid the template for somebody who gets a little too personal. And it's like, sounds like you're writing a bad essay right now, kind of guy. But I digress. I was wondering, you write about having a driver's license and not driving.
Yes.
I also have a driver's license and I don't drive. A, why are all cartoonists the same? And B, did you ever drive? Did you decide not to?
Yeah.
I used to drive.
I drove enough to pass my exam, and then I drove like 2 times after that to celebrate, and then I stopped driving just because I've always lived in very like transit friendly cities, and I just never really needed to drive. But then, as I say in my book, I also like ask friends to drive me and coolly. So that's how I survived. And I thought that I had gotten away with it completely when like Lyft and Uber came out. But then I realized not so much ever since we had 2020 kick in. And now I'm kind of stuck at home. What about you?
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, we're all kind of stuck at home.
Yeah.
I moved to New York City, and it's not because I didn't want to drive, but it is a big plus of living here. But I used to drive when I was a teenager, and I just think driving is very scary.
Yeah.
And now instead, I just walk around a lot and got a dog, and now walk around even more. I feel like, I mean, we both made books where we tell personal stories, and I feel like there is some overlap, and I wonder if it's like a sensibility that leads people to want to make comics. That wasn't really a question. That was just an errant thought that I had.
Yeah. No, I definitely thought about it when I was reading your book as well, because I was like, there's an overlap in like sentiment. I don't know how to explain it. Like when you read it, you feel it. I'm sure you did. But I was like, maybe it's like the anxieties or like the inner monologue or like just not knowing what's happening 90% of the time. And I feel like you can kind of feel that emotional connection with the author. So I really enjoyed reading your book for that reason as well.
Thank you. I would love to, if it's all right, read a bit from your introduction, which I think does a great job of very eloquently synopsizing the thing that you capture. where you say, well, you start, there's a strange but potent comfort in the discovery that someone else in the universe has experienced the exact same feelings as we have. And seeing these feelings, the ones we previously thought were unique to us, perfectly articulated by someone else, always comes as a bit of a surprise. It makes me wonder whether all our stories are more or less the same, that there's a fixed number of emotions to be had in this world, and despite the distinctive notes that separate your stories from mine, the underlying feelings that we experience, even the most deeply isolating ones, are actually much more universal than we think. And I love that. And I just feel like now when we're in this moment where we're so atomized and it's so difficult to see other people, it's just like, it's amazing to read a book that's like a, you know, it's this transmission of your life and feelings and outlook in this way that's so personal. And you know, I'm far away, and I can read this book and know you a little bit better. I'm wondering if you have books that give you that feeling where you read them and you feel less alone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I read your book last night, and I was just messaging you about how like that was exactly the sentiment I felt for so many parts of it too, right? Where you're just like, this is exactly. I think it helps that it's something that you wouldn't necessarily tell friends. Sometimes it's just like feelings of like, oh, this is what I feel when I'm sitting alone in the dark or when I'm about to go to sleep. And then when someone was able to write about that and you read it, there's like this solace or like a feeling of solidarity. Which is always super nice. And I feel like that, like your book definitely did that. A lot of other books I read this year gave me that feeling just to drop more book recommendations. And I kind of had that sense as well. I think typically when I read books that are, that contain sort of like an inner monologue, about what they think and kind of like what they're scared about, I feel like I'm very close to the author, even though I don't know them at all. So I think it's nice. It's very nice, especially during the pandemic when we're all kind of stuck in our own little bubbles.
Yeah, no, I agree. Is there some story that you felt like, I'm making a story and this is about just something that is unique to me and I'm strange and here goes, and just putting out in the world, where somebody else was like, no, that happened to me?
Yeah, I think like comics I've done recently, like I posted a comic about resigning the team that I'm on, and it was like the anxiety of I always say quitting, but it's technically not quitting, it's resigning. Like the anxiety of leaving, even when you have like a good relationship with your teammates or maybe your boss, it's just so stressful. And I was just like, because it was happening at the time, so I was telling a friend of mine, like, I'm really stressed about this. There's no reason for me to be stressed or weird about it, but I'm very weird about it. And then I just wrote a comic to kind of like get closure with that feeling. And a lot of people seem to resonate with it. It just seems like something that a lot of us go through. So I think it's always nice to have that feeling of like, oh, I guess I'm not the only weirdo out here. All of these people seem to agree, so I think it's okay.
Yeah. What was the first comic you made in this collection?
The first comic I made in this collection, I think it might have been either The Glory of Quitting, or I don't remember, like one of those two.
Did you, this was something that I spent a lot of time working on and reworking, which was like finding an organizing principle for this stuff. Yeah, how did you go about organizing these stories?
I think some stories just came out in like a very like strong structure. Other stories, I had just like a bunch of random comics on a topic that I wanted to like weave into a narrative. But so in conclusion, there wasn't a very clear process. It was really just like trying to figure it out. Like you throw everything in the pit and then you just keep arranging it until it makes some sort of narrative sense. What about you?
No, I feel that I love editing. I think that that's one of the most fun parts. And to your point, just yeah, when you put that all in there, and then you get to start, fine tuning. That's just it's a really joyful process. And so yeah, I love to look at the whole thing and then start moving things around.
Yeah. I think it's joyful when it fits, because then it's sort of like when you finish the puzzle. But when you're like stressed, right? I was very stressed when I was writing it.
Okay, there are two more questions that I want to make sure we have time for. One just occurred to me because it's something that I think about a lot. But do you have like specific soundtracks that you write to? Do you have music that you like to listen to, or podcasts, or?
When I was writing the book, no. When I'm writing comics, I'm that person who plays TV in the background. It's really bad. I just like it when it's not quiet. It's like a little bit of stimulation. So sometimes I'll like run The Office or Parks and Rec or like Good Place in the background as I work on comics.
Wow, 3 shows with by Michael Schur. All 3
Yeah,
of them.
He knows how to write a good show.
Yeah, and also like a comfort show.
Yeah, and like nice shows that you don't have to like really pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure. The final question that I have for you is, you write in the book about trying to come up with 3 good memories for every person who plays a significant role in your life. And I think that this book is a pretty significant achievement in your life. And I was wondering if you might treat the book like a close friend, and if you could share with us 3 good memories.
Yeah, I think the book is pretty recent, and I had a good relationship with it. So I think I have more than 3 good memories, but probably signing the book contract. So I went to New York to sign the contract at the HarperCollins office, which is gorgeous, as you know.
Yeah.
And then that moment, definitely, because that's when it sort of felt real, because prior to that, it was all like emails and a lot of like chatting, but it didn't really feel real until I like signed pen to paper. And then the second one would probably be when we landed on a subtitle, because I don't know how long it took you to figure out your title, but it was a lot of back and forth for this book. We didn't land on a title for a really long time. It was a lot of like playing tennis in terms of like me proposing a title and then like HarperCollins proposing a title and then back and forth. So when we finally landed on like, it's going to be this one, we're done, we're locking it in. That was a very good feeling. And then the last one is probably the more recent memory of like holding the book for the first time and then feeling how it's like hefty and soft.
That's awesome. I mean, there's so much joy in this book, and I feel so lucky to have read my copy and to be included in this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Congratulations. I'm sure that there are people, I don't know how Crowdcast works, but some toggle type situation.
Okay, so we don't have any questions yet. So
I have 100 more questions then.
Okay, so maybe you can ask a few, and we'll remind people out there, because you're out there, I can see you, to maybe put in your questions in the Ask a Question button so we can get to those. And if not, I have a few of my own. So you guys go first. There we go. Here's a question. Hang on. Let's see. Okay. This is from Sophie. How did your family feel about you wanting to go this career path? That's a good question.
So I didn't. This isn't my career path. So kind of a cheat of a response. This is sort of something I moonlight with. So in the daytime, I work as a designer. So they're okay with it because they didn't even know about it for a really long time. And then only when I had to publish a book, I was like, by the way, you know those comics I make? I made it into a book, so maybe you guys want to read it. What about you, Jason?
My parents were very encouraging. I always loved comics, and they like took me to conventions. And one thing that I got that I didn't realize was I just kind of took this for granted. It's like, oh yeah, this is what parents do. But I now appreciate is really special is they always made it clear also like, oh, you love comics, you can do this for your job if you want. So yeah, I felt very encouraged.
That's awesome. Yeah, my parents definitely did not do that.
How did you both get started in comics?
Do you want to go?
How did you get started?
Yeah, you go first. I always loved comics, and when I was in college, I applied for this internship at Mad Magazine, which was a magazine I loved and read voraciously. And the application was you had to write an article that would appear in Mad. And because I had an encyclopedic knowledge of this magazine and read every issue, I was like kind of good at doing that. And then they let me be their intern, and that felt like comedy writing boot camp. And I did some freelance illustration jobs in college as well. And yeah, it's been kind of a very linear path. Like this just kind of always was the thing that I wanted to do, and I was very like tunnel vision about like, let's do this.
That's awesome. That means you kind of like landed on the right thing from the start. I'm nodding because I feel like I know your story because I read your book.
Yeah, that is in the book.
Yes, I remember this. Yeah, like very different. I think a little bit different at least. I cycled through a couple different careers before landing on this one, and then this one not being my career, but more of like an interest. So it started because I went to VanCaf, which is a Vancouver Comic Arts Festival with a friend. And then it's just this like wonderful local art flea market where all these authors from like around are like selling comics and prints that are like handmade into little booklets for $5 to $20. And it's just like this amazing feeling to be in a space where everyone's so excited about their work. But I went to VanCaf and was essentially inspired to kind of create my own comics. And I knew that I wouldn't have the self-discipline to contain it in my sketchbook. So I threw it up on the internet and in hopes of like kind of capturing it so I don't lose it, but also to kind of motivate myself to kind of share and post more comics.
What's the hardest part about sharing such personal stories?
Yeah. So like, I guess we kind of like talked about it, but like just the sense of feeling the weight of what people like or don't like and not having that affect your work or guide your work. So I feel like sometimes I'm getting better at it, but definitely not perfect at avoiding it. Sometimes when you see whether or not something gets likes or engagement or like comments, that affects how you look at your work. And I think that's really hard because you want to be doing the work you want to do. You want to be telling the stories you want to tell, regardless of what people think about it. So I guess like the artist side of me kind of wants to fight that a little bit. But at the same time, I want to look at what people are responding to and kind of building more stories for those people. What about you, Jason?
I struggle with telling stories that are personal and specific, but that include other people. Like, I end up asking a lot of people if it's okay to use this story or use the thing that they said. And I continue to like have anxiety about that. You know, like, did I do right by this other person and in the interaction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're so much more courteous than I am because I don't. A lot of times I don't ask, and they'll just see it in the comic and they'll be like messaging me on the side. That's me, right? And I'm like, yeah. Is that cool? And they're like, yeah, it's fine.
So Kristen would like to know, what is the easiest or most difficult part of your writing process?
Am I going first?
Yeah, if you've got an answer at the ready. If you want to think, I can take it first.
I'm gonna take a pause to think.
Okay. I would say that the easiest part is when I know that it's not going to see the light of day. I do a lot of preparatory work. I do a lot of like notes to myself and sketches, and that part feels really free. And it feels important to me also to like have permission. Okay, this is like the scariest version of the thing because nobody has to see this, and sometimes like that's the only way to like convince myself to like end up making that story. Just start out and being like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be published. And then, or I think about the work actually being something that people besides me hunched over my desk will see, the more difficult it becomes.
Yeah, so you like bury it in the attic when you're like, no, not ready for the world.
Oh yeah. I've got some I've got some Sylvia Plath comics for sure.
I think for me, it's the process of letting things go and out into the world. Especially in writing the book, it was really hard for me to stop editing, and my editor will probably be nodding if she heard this because she basically had to cut me off, and she's like, no more editing, because I'd just be like, but can we just do like 2 more edits on these 16 pages, and then also like rewrite this entire paragraph because now I hate it after reading it 100 times. So I think for me, it's like, even for like, I'm a little bit better about it when it's posting on the internet because I feel like it's not as permanent. But when it's like going to print, it was very hard for me to let things go and just know that it's not going to be perfect and just leave it be. So that was definitely the hardest thing for me.
So Vishal would like to know, who are your favorite authors, but non-comic?
My favorite authors, non-comic, would probably be Harry Potter series, so J.K. Rowling, as well as David Sedaris, as well as I think like those are the 2 that I would be like, oh, I've had like a couple books that I really like. And then other people, I feel like I can't say they're my favorite because I've only read like 1 book from them. But yeah, those are the 2 that I would rely on, that I would be like, if they publish something, I'm going to get it.
For me, James Baldwin and Vivian Gornick, who both are like, they're beautiful on a sentence by sentence level, and like they just like blow up my world every time I read them and put it back together again. And Simon Rich as a comedy writer, I think he's so funny, and also like sometimes surprisingly gets you right in the heart.
So one more. What comes next for both of you? What are you working on now?
Past. Sorry. No.
Yeah, I can give an answer, I guess. I thought I would start working on book 2 right away, even though no one asked me to. But I think I need a pause, especially with everything that's been going on this year. I'm trying to take a minute to appreciate sort of like the hard work and effort that everyone put in, because not just me, that went into this book. So kind of taking like a month or 2 at least to enjoy that before I dive into a next project. What about you?
You deserve a month or 2 at least.
Yes.
I am working on just having adopted this dog, and I am also trying to do some. What am I trying to do? I mean, I do New Yorker cartoons, and so that's a weekly process, and has been a really nice like thing that continues even in the pandemic, to have something to sit down and do every week. And those 2 things combined, because this puppy is making his way into my cartoons now.
Well, I think you both deserve some time. Definitely, I want to thank you so much for sharing of yourselves with us tonight,
Thank you.
for being with Books and Books. I want to remind everyone you can order the book. Where? At the bottom of the screen. Just press the green button. There it is. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yay!
Look at the.
Oh my
I
God.
love the end papers.
That's
It's really
gorgeous.
so beautiful. Yeah.
Gorgeous book. An amazing holiday gift. Please, order them, share them, gift them. So thank you very much. And I hope we're going to see you guys in person sometime soon.
I hope so.
And until then, I want to thank you both. I want to thank our viewers. Take care, stay safe, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.